Like Dan mentioned, I lead the customer education team here at hireEZ, have been with the team for almost 8 years now. And as Dan mentioned, work with so many of our different clients across so many different industries. So excited to share what I've been hearing in the field as we move to through today's topics.
Love it. Well, Amy, let's start at the top because we're talking about that top of the funnel. When you're talking to teams, enterprise customers, when you talk to those teams, what are you actually seeing and what are they actually talking about? And what does top of the funnel really look like?
Yeah, great question. The thing I see the most is fragmentation, right? In the tech stack and the workflow. Most teams that I talk to, they're running 6 or 7 or 8 separate tools at the top of the funnel. They have their sourcing platforms, a job marketplace, they've got their CRM, maybe some recruitment marketing spend on the side as well. And often a lot of these tools they're purchased separately, right? And essentially what is happening, right, is leaders are seeing that none of these systems they're talking to each other. And they're realizing that the main challenge is that a candidate, right, is showing up maybe in 3 of these systems, 4 of these systems. They're getting worked by their team multiple times, or they're even worse, right? Falling into the gaps between these tools, getting dropped in the process, and end up, not getting worked at all. So teams they're paying for all of these different tools, but they're losing people, right, in the gaps between these systems.
Yeah, for sure. Because the problem isn't any one tool that they're utilizing. It's what happens in between them. And that brings me to something I hear leaders get wrong all the time. They see the cost, but they misread what it's actually costing them. Can you elaborate a little bit when you're talking to leaders, head of TA? Do the leaders you work with actually know what's costing them right now?
Mostly no. And the danger in that, right, is that the cost is it's invisible, but then part of that invisibility of the problem and the cost of that problem is that then leaders they're going in to solve the wrong problem, right? And that ends up being costly in many different ways. So to share a bit of an example, right? This is a client that I work with, a team that I've talked to regularly. They had decided, right, their top of funnel sourcing strategy, it had hit a ceiling. They were ready to, kind of pull budget, pivot, which, is reasonable logic, right, at first glance. But when we actually were really looking into, usage next to the outcomes, what we ended up realizing is that, the strategy ceiling, right, so to speak, wasn't really the issue. It was that the workflow that they had envisioned, right, the one that they were paying for, it didn't really exist in a cohesive way. Nobody really realized it though, because the fragmentation that we were just talking about, that had been kind of the operating model or the operating mode for years. And the spend, right, across all of these different systems, the usage was living in, some, not others as much. It was fragmented again, right? And no one had ever really put kind of the cost of all of these different pieces alongside the usage, right, in one place. So leadership essentially was about to make a budget call, a budget decision on numbers that didn't really tell the full story, numbers that didn't exist.
For sure. Yeah, leadership was, like you said, was about to make a budget call on a number that didn't exist. The math wasn't wrong, it was absent. Um, I want everyone in the chat to just sit with that for a second because that exactly scenario we designed this session around. So maybe let's talk about what the fix actually looks like in real time, real use cases. What changes when those tools actually come together in one consolidated workflow?
Yeah. So we start with the problem that it solves, right? And right now, when a recruiter reaches out, there's this gap in the three things that truly matter, right, in engaging with a candidate. Is this person qualified? Are they interested in the opportunity? And are they available? Right? A recruiter usually knows one, maybe two of those things about a candidate, right, at any given time. They see someone's qualified on paper. Great, right? Maybe they're guessing at the other two. Are they actually interested? Are they actually available? So they're burning through their outreach effort on people that who never were going to convert, right? They look at the usage numbers and the activity is kind of hiding that gap because, the outreach, it was still happening, right? Roles were still getting filled more or less. But now picture all of those different tools, the six or seven or eight that I mentioned before, and consolidate them, right? Bring them into one interconnected workflow with automation sitting on top. The system already knows that the candidate matches the role requirements. We know that the candidate is already engaged with the brand. We know that they're engaged in the talent community, the recruitment marketing efforts. Maybe we see that they just clicked on a job ad. And I'll be fully honest, right? That, I don't have a team that I'm working with that's doing all of this in one view today. But I can tell you that what changes in this process, because I do see teams that, they're losing candidates in these system gaps, right? That one solution would close. Some teams, they do have parts of this automation, parts of this workflow consolidation in motion. But what happens, right, when that cohesive system of execution with automation exists across the entire top of the funnel, right? It's turning a list into a true pipeline.
A list into a pipeline. I love that. And look, what Amy just described, that unified view, that's the direction everything is moving of what we're seeing every day. For leaders weighing what to do with this, let me ask you like a practical question. Like, what actually changes for their operation and kind of what's the catch?
What's the catch? Let me start with the version first that a lot of leaders are skeptical of, right? And that's fair, right? To have a bit of skepticism in the thought process around this. The thing is, right, this is not a scenario where we want to just, flip on an agent or two, get rid of half the team. The people that, believe that and action on that, they often get burned in the process.
Mhm.
So the real change, and this is like the work to be done, is that the sourcing, the deduplication effort, the outreach motions that are drafted in all sorts of different engagement strategies, the scheduling of candidates, all of that gets absorbed, right, by the work of an agent in some capacity, right? And what that means is that the existing team's capacity, right, your recruiters, their ability to have more bandwidth, right, it goes up without you having to add headcount. So your team, right, they're spending their time on the judgment calls, the emotional value, right, that they are bringing to the candidate conversations, the relationships they're building, instead of drowning in busy work. And
For sure.
here's kind of the catch, right, that skeptics are, totally right about. You only get that kind of ideal state if you delegate the agents, if you delegate the system well, you supervise it thoroughly. The team that sets the guardrails, they refined how the agent is approaching the work. And they did that early on, right? Those are the ones that are doing well, right, in this transformation. The ones who treat it as kind of set it and forget it, they get mediocre output, right? And then kind of blame, oh, the tool, the system doesn't work, when the capacity gain, right, that we're talking about, it's real, right? It's possible. It's earned, though. It's not automatic.
Yeah, I think when you said earn, not automatic, that really hits home to in recruiting, there's always that next tool or technology that has over the course of the last 15 years, we always had something. And I do it myself. We want a new tool and just, hey, we do it, let it do it for us. But the true recruiters and recruiting teams that, like you said, are maximizing this is setting up those guardrails and really putting in the effort on what does this look like long term and how do I want my system to operate because I'm in control. It's earned, it's not automatic. I think that's the most honest framing I've ever heard on this, and that's exactly why teams moving early on are pulling ahead and really embracing this. Amy, let's close on that because I think the timing piece here is something every leader in this room needs to hear. Um, when we were kind of wrapping up, where does this leave the leaders watching today when they're going back to their teams? What is the biggest takeaway in kind of this conversation and this consolidation piece and this agentic AI movement? What does this mean, kind of maybe for the early adopters and the leaders watching today?
Yeah, great question. And I think one thing that I would consider everyone to kind of sit with, right, is the time is now, right? The moment is here. That may require some strategy work. It may require some deep review of the tools that you have in place, right? But that kind of trigger point of it's time, right? That's here. And it's okay, right, that a lot of leaders haven't gotten deep into what those next steps are, right? They haven't done the math yet to figure out where that consolidation needs to happen. But when you take your real, top of funnel spend, put it next to what it is actually producing, right? Then the consolidation business case, it starts to make itself, right? You have that set of numbers that can help you explain and dive into where do we need to identify, right? And close those gaps that we've talked about. The teams that are moving on this now, right, they get a advantage kind of structurally than the teams that are slower to move. And right now that's an edge, right? Soon this is going to be like table stakes, the cost of competing. The window is open, but it's not going to stay open. So Dan, I think you've got a better picture as well of what those early movers have looked like before. And, as we kind of round out this conversation, would love to pass back to you and, share a bit more on that note.
Yeah, I mean, I've been in recruiting my whole career, and I think about what happened with LinkedIn in the early days or programmatic advertising. The teams that moved first didn't just get a head start; they built structural advantages. The slower movers literally could not buy back. That's the movement we're in right now with all of this agentic AI and the workflows and some of this automation and what does it look like for our company? I think for the last, 1 to 2 years, people are just kind of tipping their toes in and seeing, okay, can we utilize this? But really, the what we're seeing the companies that are fully invested in this movement are getting ahead of the game quickly because they're early adopters. With anything, early adopters, the early bird gets the worm kind of analogy. That's kind of what we're in. We're seeing a lot of success from customers adopting some of the tools, the resources that we deliver, and other companies' technologies. So my ask is, if you're not having these conversations, I would start having those conversations with your CEO, CFO of saying, hey, let's look at the budget. Let's look at what's costing at the top of the funnel and how do we consolidate some of these tools, resources to speed up the process and be early adopters within this agentic AI workflow. Um, I'd love to hear any feedback. If anybody has any questions, any topics that come to mind in the chat, feel free to utilize that. And we have a couple more minutes here to do so. Um, I put in the chat too. If you want to hear a little more about what hireEZ has to offer, we do have some upcoming news in the next couple of weeks that is very, very exciting that I think can really change how we look at the top of the funnel within a consolidation piece. So make sure that you're following us on Facebook, LinkedIn, social media for news there. And then also a big announcement, we are going to be doing another big conference late August. If you're familiar, we do RecruitCon, the big conference that's virtual for your teams that are 100% free and 100% virtual, so everybody has access to that. But as we wrap up, Amy, any other things that you're seeing within the market, any customers, anything like that that you want the audience to take away from this conversation about top of the funnel and how much it costs and what are some ways that they can really streamline this?
So I think it goes back to what we were talking about on the early adopters and taking an approach that allows you to refine and optimize over time
Hmm.
with any agentic solution. And I will speak to this from not only the conversations that I have with clients, but also my own team's adoption of AI in our day-to-day work. It's truly not a set it and forget it motion. And the teams that are able to ramp up and see true value in bringing AI holistically into their workflows, they're the ones that are open to refining over time, asking the questions of, is this really saving us time if we add AI here? Is this the type of experience we want to deliver to our operators, our recruiters, right? Is this the type of experience we want to deliver to our candidates? And identifying, right, where should we inject the AI? Where is it not needed? Right? Map that out. And then, to bring it all together, of course, that consolidation piece that allows the AI to have enough data and candidate kind of reference points to operate off of effectively. So coming full circle, right? Of course, that consolidation piece is really kind of, I don't want to say the magic, but a bit of magic in what makes the AI as effective as you want it to be.
For sure. Obviously, you have a big training background within working with teams, customers, enterprise level, everything. You've seen it all. What would you say to teams that want to invest in this? Is there a certain time per week that they're investing in, hey, how do we utilize AI? Because working with some recruiters, sometimes they want to utilize it to speed up their processes, etc., but maybe they don't have time scheduled away to say, hey, how do I play with this? Because everything's moving so quickly, and sometimes it gets overwhelming of, hey, I don't know how to utilize a tool. Any recommendations there from a training purpose that people can take away?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it really is a matter of prioritization and dedicating time, real time, right, to develop skills, develop these new ways of working. And again, multifold kind of answer. This is how I approach it with my team as well as with clients, in the sense that, there's always the top priority, right, in the day-to-day work. For my team, that's our work with our customers. For our clients, right, that's the candidate, right, experience, the candidate journey, filling the recs. So yes, that priority still is there. but then it's weaving in, hey, maybe it's 30 minutes, right? Once a week, especially if the team's bandwidth is super stretched right now. Find that time to talk about, right? The ways of using that AI tool as a team together, right? Finding those times where you can have a dedicated learning session. But I think where there's, real momentum is in peer-to-peer sharing and learning on, hey, this is how I use it and it works really well. These are the prompts that are bringing a ton of value. This is what didn't really work and made me run out of my tokens in 5 hours, right? So finding those little moments of connection as well and a sense of camaraderie, and like we're all learning this and figuring this out together, and having that team support and that dedicated time again to support each other, right, in the learning process.
Love it. As we wrap up, I want to tell everyone that joined, thank you so much for doing this. We'll continue to do this maybe every other month of, hey, looking back on what we're seeing from our customers, use cases, conversations, what we're having with leaders each and every day to share. And that's what it's all about. Having these webinars is you see something, say something, and making sure that everybody collectively is adopting as we move into the agentic AI top of the funnel world. I think it's going to be a really big impact. So, Amy, thank you so much. Thanks again, everyone attending. This webinar will be recorded and up on our YouTube page for further viewing if you would like in the next couple days. And again, get connected with me if you're interested in connecting on a podcast or doing a webinar or any other things that you want to get within this community. I'm happy to help and connect the dots. Again, thank you so much, Amy. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a fabulous rest of your Tuesday, and more to come in the next couple of weeks with some pretty cool announcements that making sure that you guys see. So thanks again.
Thanks, everyone.
The future of talent acquisition isn't coming. It's already here. See for yourself at hireEZ.com.